That's an awesome topic, but I'd just like to continue my previous discussion before we end up in this kind of very interesting as well, trust and understanding AI, and either having kind of internal kind of understanding how models or neural networks works, etc. But before that, we have techniques versus effects. I think and hope we all agree that it's bad to regulate techniques, at least, right?
Yeah, I think that would be problematic because as we discussed in the very beginning, big data is already used today. Yeah. Engineering, math.
Yeah. Exactly. It's really reduced back to basic math.
It becomes ridiculous when someone says we need to regulate math. Yeah. Like you're not allowed to do a certain equation on paper. That's illegal. Yeah. That sounds totalitarian to me.
So then coming to the other question, which was the high risk versus low risk, and potentially the not optimal kind of definition, which we haven't seen yet. It's just a proposal, as you said, from EU. But trying to define, some sectors potentially in society is high risk AI, and that could, for example, be medical. Yeah. Right. So you use AI to try to guide like a robot kind of surgeon or whatnot, or you use it to make some kind of diagnosis or so forth. That could potentially be classified as high risk, and then any kind of application that is used or using AI needs to be regulated more than perhaps music recommendations from Spotify. But it won't kill anyone, even though it may make some people really angry when having to listen to Danish rap music.
You can truly get psychological scars from Danish rap music.
Yes. So that sounds good, I think, in theory, but I think it has a lot of issues if you say a complete sector, like medical sector, needs to be regulated more if they are going to use AI.
Well, this is not regulating application. This is something else. This is more problematic.
So this would be interesting because you are the expert in this, and to my understanding at least, it does seem like they try to regulate more of a sector rather than an effect. So basically, if you want to use AI in a medical kind of, let's say you have a system where you enter journal text or something, it has no dangerous effects. It's just a simple AI
But basically
tool.
What they say is that it needs to be legal. Yeah. And one thing we need to remember there is that it's not that we are living in a lawless field now. There are many laws that apply to AI already today. We have like discrimination, product liability, etc. So they say it needs to be legal, and it also needs to be ethical. And then they go through different kind of like ethical standards. It's everything from security, integrity, transparency. That's part of basically ethical. And then they say that it needs to be robust. We need to trust that it actually works and it won't break down. So what they are considering is, should we have mandatory law for different fields or different like high risk sectors?
But don't you think there is a risk that if they simply classify a whole field, like the medical sector or something, that they will be so much further behind in terms of innovation in general because they have a higher demands on regulation? Even though it may be a small part of, a medical sector, let's say that they want to use AI to simply, stupid example, regulate the ventilation in hospitals.
I think this is super interesting. And I can't remember if it was you that said this quote, but is it actually ethical not to use AI?
Exactly, yes.
Exactly. We should have that on print.
Actually.
Yeah.
I think this is actually from Kai originally.
Yeah, Kai Andersson, yeah. Because, and that actually goes back to what I was trying to say before around, like, what do we need when it comes to trust, for people to trust AI? Because if we have an AI model...
You're doing a bridging now.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the bridge. Let's take the bridge. So we have gone around...
Your questions are super, super hard.
Okay.
It's also, I wasn't prepared to deliver an answer to the EU Commission tonight.
Okay. In short, I think it's super interesting that we have regulation and they are formulated correctly. And I think you actually were at least the first time I heard it, that put it into
regulate
words.
The application of the effect.
Yeah, the effects, not the techniques, nor I would say the sector.
Yeah, but
I think it's equally
But I think
dangerous.
you need to look sector-wise also. Not saying that it should be, Because in some sectors you should be more careful.
But it's really hard to do that topic, because I take the example of a hospital. A hospital, you have the fundamental patient care, giving care. But if you look at the whole hospital, 80% of the cost is made up of administration, right? Running a hospital, administrating, So where
then you can use AI for the
this is the point.
tasks.
This is the point. Where do you need to have regulation that is relevant for a business controller? Because now we are talking about typical business controller stuff. So now we need to define then the sector procurement, business control versus doctoring.
Yeah.
I live with a high regulation in AI for doctoring, but I don't live with a high regulation for business control of a hospital. I don't think that makes sense. So for me, then, if you take health science or a hospital as a sector, I think you're way out of line, because you haven't dissected the different areas of a hospital.
I think we should just do what you said.
Yeah,
regulate the effects.
Not the technique.
So then you solve that problem, right?
But I actually have a question for you guys. So would it be possible that we have, let's say, a doctor that has AI tools available and an AI model that could help the doctor predict like tumors? Is it a trade between the model's performance and explainability?
Should I start? Or,
yeah. I think you should start. I think you can take it deeper.
I think one way to answer that is to speak about the human neural network versus the artificial neural network.
Okay.
It's so dangerous sometimes that you put so much higher standards on the artificial neural network than you do on the human neural network.
So when you say
the doctor versus the AI together making a
human neural network is the brain.
That's the doctor.
The H&N versus the A.
So people complain about lawyers speaking like legalese.
Yes.
Well, we haven't talked about engineers.
Engineers can do this.
Engineerese.
But so the bottom line question is, how far should we take explainability in AI?
Yeah, I was just wondering about is it a trade? A trade-off?
Trade-off, yeah. Lowering the performance.
Say the short answer is no, because we even at Deltarion has a PhD student looking specifically into this, where a deep neural network can even explain things perhaps even better than humans can. This was the point I'm trying to get at, that if we have AI that's actually trained to explain things, not by looking at the internals of a neural network, but actually having the neural network as a core design principle to being able to explain if you should, for example, prescribe antibiotics, which is one of the use cases we're looking into, then you can actually have an AI system that potentially is even better than human doctors to explain why they think you should prescribe antibiotics, for example.
So you say no?
No.
What?
So
this is like snillen spekulerar.
Trade-off. You say don't
trade-off.
Don't deal with the trade-off. Go for the best.
No, because
I think if we do it the right way, we don't have to make the trade-off. Yeah. So that's probably one way to say it.
In your example here, do you use an AI to explain the AI?
Yeah.
Okay.
So and let me now answer the same question.
Okay.
Because
she's turning the tables now twice a third time.
This is very professional. You had media training in Deltarion, right?
Exactly.
The ABC. Acknowledge, bridge.
Key message.
Core message. So you everybody, you see what she's doing to us.
Yes.
I would answer it with another way. Well, doesn't it depend on if you think the AI should perform the whole task versus you use AI as an augmented approach to the doctor? Because if the AI is supposed to explain, give the recommendation to the patient, it then needs to be explainable in some ways. And maybe you need to be on the safe side. But if the AI tool is now put in the hands as an augmentation of the actual doctor, which is still in the loop, then then the doctor knows more detail and has worked maybe with hundreds of cases and has experience around how this AI works. So he can explain in normal doctor ways to the patient and therefore the whole explainable topic is a little bit different. So for me, are we talking about the AI doing the whole thing, or are we talking about augmented intelligence?
Yeah, because what I wonder is that if we know that an AI model could actually save lives, do we really need to understand how it works just to understand like the transparency?
Yeah,
and I think she just jumped into a very interesting topic now, which is the trolley example and saving lives. If you remember that one, I can give a quick outline for that. But in short, I'd like to summarize that kind of question that you brought. Should we or do we need to make a trade-off between explainability and accuracy? Call it that. I think today perhaps yes, tomorrow no. So I think
you're talking about techniques to take away the trade-off.
Yes.
And of course there is a big difference with the AI of today and the AI of 10 years from now.
But for someone that doesn't understand the transparency part, so in concrete ways, how would you describe how a model works to make people comfortable with it?
I wouldn't just as if you asked how does Henrik's brain work, you wouldn't go in and say, this part of his brain is working like that and this part is working like that.
Yeah.
That's not the proper way to explain why he made a decision in killing a person, right?
we trust his experience.
No, but you ask him. Give me a motivation. Give me explanation for why you made that decision.
What is your hypothesis based on, or what is your recommendation based on? And then you will not see my neural network working, but you will see me. Well, my neural network may identify this as a key data point, this as a key data point, and then I reflected and I crunched and I came up with this. I think it's this. So explainability should be about identifying.
It's not about introspection; it's actually about explainability. I think that's a way to phrase it.
So let's be concrete now. So what you're asking, when you're talking about XAI, we are talking about. We have a deep neural network. It works, we're not following the neurons, but we can ask the neural network which one was the key parameters that was.
I should simply explain it's in even natural language.
And could you give could you exemplify this now? Because I think this is not so.
It's just speaking about me. Okay, but I want to jump into another question now, and we should speak about Evelina.
I'd like to comment on this actually. Yeah. So how do you explain how air condition works?
Sorry?
How do you explain how air condition works?
Air conditioning.
Do we need to explain to somebody?
Exactly, but I think that comes back to trust. And I can't remember who described this example, but basically, if we have an airplane today, we have a human that operates the plane. And we assume that human want to live. So it will do their best. He or she will do their best to keep the plane up in the air and land safely. But if we don't have a human in there, if we only have a computer, how would we trust that this computer or system have this same goal to live?
But that is also strange because the pilot's only, operating 20% of the flight?
Yeah.
Because their whole job is to just basically lift and land. The rest of it is automatically, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. But I think perhaps my brain, isn't that clever when it comes to like being logical like that, because you just assume that. Well, the pilot will do their best to keep us alive. Let
me very quickly, but then I really want to bring it back to like what is ethics and that type of question. Yes. But let me give an example, because I think I heard an interesting example of humans can't always be trusted either. And there is a classic.
Oh, sorry! Every time some of you speak, like.
So there's a classic example of human.
No
driving,
more for me.
Human driving or flying an airplane, and he basically turned the altitude meter on the airplane to basically crash in the Alps, and he basically wanted to kill all the passengers. And now the question is, we know humans sometimes are evil or simply, are not functioning properly.
Okay.
And then the question is, and so are computers, of course, and machines. We so many times we have bugs and they don't really understand the context, and they are so much more stupid than humans, of course, of today. But in both cases, we have examples where things are not moving in the ethically proper way, so to speak. So how do we handle that? Well, at least to some people, there is a way to. There is the proper way, which is to say, I wish we could actually have both the machine and the human that complement each other. If the machine makes a mistake, the human can counteract that and do something. If the human suddenly says, turn down and fly into the Alps, the machine should say no and should say, this is weird. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to say no and take over control and went on autopilot. The same with cars. And I don't think it will take many years before the cars will overtake control instead of humans now today take control.
Yeah.
To suicide driving. Yeah.
Well, or whatever. No, I mean they fall asleep. They just drive to the right and for some stupid reason, and the human currently is in control, but the machine, the car, will simply say, no, I don't believe you. I don't trust you. I will take control over you and override you. And I think that's a good thing, right? So at some point, if we can complement each other, that would be the best of both worlds.
I agree. Yeah.
Now,
Evelina, you're a bit hard to discuss with because you turn the tables, you bitch all the time, but now, okay.
It's good. I enjoy it immensely, Evelina. I enjoy it immensely.
I just feel a bit sad for the listeners sometimes.
No.
It's good.
But we want to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, we do actually, Anders. So.